Hello, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to Transforming the Future of Hybrid and Online Learning Delivery in APAC, a time-set education in partnership with Class Technologies. My name is Gitanjali Goswami. I'm the Branded Content Manager at Time-set Education, and I'll be chairing today's discussion. Okay, so in this webinar, we will introduce the webinar topic, our webinar panel, and summary of the discussion. This section is followed by the panel discussion. And of course, there will be the opportunity to pose questions to the panel during the final 10 minutes of the hour that we have scheduled. So please feel free to type any questions in the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we will answer as many as possible before the end. So I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel of experts from the academia and industry, who are Matthew Baker, Senior Vice President, Strategy and International at CLAS. Welcome. Matt Hao Chen, Manager, Educational Design, Innovation and Quality Team at Monash University. Nora Kozlowski, Chief Learning Innovation Officer at Melbourne Business School. Rijando Porbocho, Director of Center for Teaching and Learning and Lecturer at Universitas Pelita Harapan. And last but not the least, we have Greg Winslet, Deputy Director of Digital Learning at the University of Queensland. So before we dive into the panel discussion, I'll just give a gist of what this discussion is going to be. So we will talk about how hybrid and online teaching and learning is becoming the norm across the Asia-Pacific region, with 66% of faculty confirming that it is their preferred mode of delivery, according to our latest research. As this transformation continues, universities must implement strategies that benefit staff and students. Adopting the right tools and platforms empowers universities to offer more personalized learning journeys and modernize pedagogical and assessment models by building stronger rapport between teachers and students and making it easier for faculty to deliver their expertise online. However, achieving these goals is not straightforward. So featuring exclusive insights from Times Higher Education and Class Technologies Faculty Survey Report, this webinar will bring together a panel of experts from academia and industry to share knowledge and best practices for embracing technological solutions and enhancing hybrid and online teaching and learning. So keeping this in mind, let's dive into the panel discussion. And maybe I would like to go first straight to Greg Winslet and just discuss about the kind of discussions that is happening with your university faculty members and staff in terms of personalizing the student journeys and boost engagement with the hybrid and online courses.
Well, thank you very much for throwing to me first. Look, there are a multitude of conversations obviously happening in my university and others, and a lot of those conversations are about tactics. You know, what are the very specific ways in which we can help personalize these experiences across a number of modes of attendance for our students. And I think, you know, I use the word personalization very advisedly because it's a term that's bandied about quite often. And for me, this is a very important topic because when we're talking about hybridity, we are talking about the opportunity for people to have very powerful teaching and learning experiences with other people in real time. So it's a very important topic. So we're talking about tactics in terms of how do we broaden, you know, our accessibility. You know, where universities in Australia are very good at being able to create a pipeline for local high schools to come through and to do undergrad degrees and so forth. But we all know, you know, there's a lot more segments of the population that would benefit from the opportunity to engage in university experiences. So that's part of the conversation that's happening at my university. But I think as well, you know, there's a certain degree of fatigue and sort of we're bemoaning, in some ways that the infrastructure, the technology that we have access to can sometimes be a real barrier for us to have those really productive educational experiences across asynchronous, synchronous, online and in the room sort of experiences, because we spend all our time sort of configuring, setting them up and managing them. And that takes us away from the core sort of value proposition when we bring students and experts together. So I'll leave it at there.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to have a question again with you, Craig, that you mentioned about the infrastructure is the problem where it's taking time to maybe focus more on setting that up instead of focusing on the teaching and learning. So what are the challenges that faculties are facing related to that, and what kind of tactics are being implemented to support them in this at the moment?
Look, I think it comes down to a kind of educative return on investment. Now, unlike many of my colleagues, my first teaching experience was actually via video conferencing. And so that's my happy place. And I very quickly learned 25 years ago that if it takes me 10 minutes to set up and explain a debate, perhaps don't do the debate. So what I'm seeing both in my local institution and more broadly is the emergence of a number of learning design heuristics and activity heuristics that are tried and tested that we know work in some of these more complicated situations where you do have people in the room, people on Zoom, and there's a lot of discipline specificity that goes in there. So what I'm seeing is people are being very strategic, and they're understanding what infrastructure and support is available, and they're starting to be able to identify the favoured techniques of guidance and activities and so on. And I think that's a very important piece of work.
Right, thank you so much. Nora, are you having any similar conversations with the university staff and teachers regarding this?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple of really important points that Greg raised, but I actually would want to start right at the beginning when we kicked off around the topic of personalization and choice, which I think is a really important topic in our sector right now. And I think there's a question for us as educators, how in that scenario, when you've got so many different options available, so many different delivery options available, there's a question of how do you blend the best of what technology affords with the best of human care. And I hear people talk about personalization to the extreme and how that is made possible by AI or by AI embedded tutoring and coaching into your LMS. And I think that's great, but I actually think that's just one sort of lens through which we can make the educational experience a lot more personalized and meaningful for students. So I think what's actually a lot more important is how do you, in that scenario, how do you equip faculty, but also those who support students, whether they're student success or sort of customer success professionals, how do you help them to use the technology to have the right conversations with students? So we're finding that a key way of personalizing the experience is actually utilizing technology, such as, so we have YellowDig, for example, as a community learning platform that's integrated into our learning management system. And we find that enables our faculty members to interact very frequently with students because they can just ask questions in a very informal way. And we can provide additional readings, we can provide additional materials, just, provide some answers to questions. And that to the student is a lot more personalized and meaningful and engaging than just sending them off on a pathway that has been generated for them through technology. So I think that's a bit of the conversation we're having now, is how do we not think about personalization too much as a technology only play.
Okay, thank you, Nora. That's very interesting, that how using technology to use it to personalize the hybrid and online courses so that teachers can engage more with the students. But I just have a question about the engagement part of it, because that is also one of the problems, challenges that we're having discussions about it. So when it comes to the engagement part of it, where sometimes if it's, for example, the students are attending online and the faculty members is finding it difficult to really gauge how much they're interested in the lessons, or maybe both synchronous and asynchronous, the part of it. So in what ways are you using the technology to support the faculty in this arena about it?
Yeah, I think engagement is actually a key issue. because that's kind of, what are we here to do? And it is to deliver impact for students. And you do that by keeping them engaged, keeping them retained, keeping them excited. And this is not a faculty only play. I think this is where we support our faculty members with a lot of data. So we collect data from the different platforms that we use, whether that's our LMS, whether that's our live learning platform, or whether that's the community platform that I've just mentioned. We have data teams that collect the different data sources. So we find out pretty much straight away, is there a student who, if it's a 6-week subject and they've been engaged, they've been logging on every day for the first 4 weeks, but then all of a sudden in week 5, they drop off, we straight away, we're able to alert the faculty member to that. We're able to just, follow up with them through an old-fashioned phone call. So I think it's how do you actually just understand how does your learner behave? And then what are the different data points that kind of help you to give an indication? And then what are your mechanisms for intervention, which I think is just key. That's you really have to plan for intervention. You have to plan for retention when you're delivering in hybrid and online.
Thank you so much, Nora. I'll come to Rijando Porbocha about this and just try to know the similar conversations that's happening at your university regarding this. Over to you. Your mic is switched off. I'm sorry, your mic is switched off.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Well, thank you for the questions also. I totally agree with that in terms of personalizations. Of course, we are facing probably different characteristics of students. We are operating in Jakarta, where the learning culture is pretty much a bit more depending to the faculty member. So the students expect more that they are coming to the campus, and they would like the faculty member guide them to go all this learning trajectory. However, since COVID, we learned a lot that we cannot just rely on one modality in the campus interaction. So we emphasize since 2 years ago that the university has established and launched the new learning pedagogy at the university level. We call it MFlex. So it's flexibilities has been emphasized to give more opportunity for the students to not coming to the campus, but at the same time, we want to emphasize that they learn actively. So they just don't listen to the lecture or they just sit in the classroom without doing nothing. So based on that, so we built several, we call it smart classrooms to facilitate that. However, we don't really ask our faculty member to do a kind of concurrent modalities interaction with the students because it takes a lot of efforts for faculty member to operate all these electronic panels, smart cameras and things like that. And utmost is that because of the different infrastructure quality in terms of bandwidth connectivity to our students. So concurrent mixed modality is not preferred for our students. So we emphasize now on the pedagogy of blended learning, we call it. So the faculty members should implement a kind of flexibility in their course outline. And let's say if they do synchronously online interactions, then the system can record it. So we purchase a media server integrated with our LMS, and we expect also the data points will give a lot of information to faculty members to track how far the video has been watched. Later on, the most challenging part is the assessment, because the academic integrity due to the too much personalized in learning can be also scary sometimes for our faculty members. So most of the exams still done in the campus location. So we do a lot with infrastructure development and also professional development for our faculty member, how they build the course, how they utilize the LMS, integrate the LMS, and the back office. We do a lot of data integrations also with our SIS. I think the first thing is that we need to identify the access first before we can analyze the data further. I think I leave it at this point first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have a question for you that when it comes to the hybrid and online delivery part of it, are the faculty members also responsible for looking to the logistics part of these platforms, or is there another set of team that looks into this at the same time that teachers can just focus on teaching? So how is it really done?
Well, it depends on the facility that the faculty member use. If they are going to use a full fledged of our smart classroom, they require a specific team to set up the devices first. So it takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to prepare. And we also have to teach the faculty member how to operate, let's say, to zoom in the camera and switch the smart board with PowerPoint display. But we also have a kind of small cameras installed, personalized in the computer PCs in the classroom, where they can just instantly turn it on. But the drawback is that it's not movable camera, so it's give a very static view and sometimes poor microphone. So that's the drawback of that. So we need a kind of standard for infrastructure in the classroom.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll go to Matt Chen and maybe also ask you where's the similar conversation that's happening at a university, and then we'll come to Matt Baker. Matt Chen,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I just want to get I think a few points mentioned earlier about the engagement in class. I think one of the things we do need to be really consider is the design of the session. Is to a degree, it's not just about online classes, but it's crucial in online setting. I think the activity need to be purposeful. So we need to have the interaction and purpose for students to engage in a scheduled teaching activity, like synchronized activity. Otherwise, we heard a word from students that, if vast majority of the activity are involved didactic teaching, then there's not much motivation for them to engage in that session. So I think that's one thing we need to be mindful about. The other one I want to touch for flexible learning pathway is around the course design. I think we do need to design at the course level and program with flexible learning pathway for students, and then the course structure itself need to cater the different student need. In the meantime, we need to cautious about academic standard and not compromise on that. And I think the careful design of the course and program would require the support of the educational technology and learning analytics, etc., to enable that. So we need to understand the student progress and what's their prerequisite, the pre-understanding of the knowledge, so that we push the relevant content and material activity to them. And there's also importance to have variety of the content in different format to suit the student need. For boosting engagement inside the hybrid classes, I think, what we talked about earlier is really focusing on the design of the activity, as well as having the right collaboration technology to support that. So I just want to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much. Now come to Matt Baker and also try to understand that, like class technologies in general is helping to achieve this in terms of personalizing, the journeys and also boost engagement with the hybrid and online classes. I think in various sectors, for example, in higher education, which is also known as class for higher education, and also industry, class for work. So you have very similar conversations in all these sectors. So I just want to ask you, Matt, that what are the kind of similar conversations that you're having with the university partners, or maybe, the kind of insights that you have had from the faculty survey report in terms of the kind of technology or tools or maybe platforms that can help university in this, in both synchronous and asynchronous hybrid and online courses? Matt, your mic is switched on.
It's going to happen every single call. Thank you for all the panelists and your feedback here, because I think it does play into what we look at. The interesting thing about what's happening on the institutional level across the globe is really around flexibility. From a faculty standpoint, giving them flexibility to extend their classroom where they didn't have the ability to do it previously. It's also being able to just create a different interaction that they didn't have previously, especially when you marry that with some of the most pertinent data is around the student preference. And the student preference, by far, when we talked about the students about a year ago, the student preferences, it was flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Like that was the top three. And so what we look at is trying to marry the idea of this, what students want in flexibility and what that means with the faculty in their flexibility. If you can do that well, then you probably have something to really offer. And that those points of kind of the cross where they cross is, and it was already been mentioned here, it's around engagement, right? What we found during the pandemic is teachers did have and instructors did have the best learning outcomes. They did have the best content. They did have the best assessments. But when you brought those online and you didn't have a strong level of engagement, everything dropped off. And so what we see as the crossroads of bringing the faculty and students together is creating a really engaging platform that I think ties all of our comments together. Then what ends up happening after that is capturing a strong set of analytics and data that you're pulling from a live session. So I came from the LMS space and been doing that for almost 25 years. And one thing that was really hard is to capture really valuable data in an asynchronous way. You know, you have to really try to parse through the context and environments that this data is coming to you from. And instead, with a synchronous session, you're really catching live interaction. You're catching live ways to adjust. And so I think Nora, you spoke about some of that data and the analytics side to how to use that to better serve your faculty and the experience. We see the same thing. So if you can keep the engagement up and then layer that with really strong analytics and engagement scores, if you will, of are they raising their hand? Are they staying focused? Are they are they doing other things that really play into that? That's where we see that blend of the teachers wanting to have some type of hybrid. You mentioned the percentage of 61, I think 60, maybe 66% of faculty really want to have a hybrid experience. And then students it was like 75%. So we need to do that together in a way that is going to provide strong engagement, as well as give the institution a way to track how to better serve your modality through analytics. So that's kind of, I think, what I bring together and what we've spoken about so far today.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. And also, I think in general, the discussion is about that, yes, engagement is very important and how it should be very immersive, very interactive, but also it also depends on the digital skills that the universities are able to train the faculties and their students, because that is what I think is also taking the time. I think there was a discussion. I think, yeah, Greg mentioned about the infrastructure that, focusing on infrastructure and training rather than focusing on the quality of the classes that you are delivering. So maybe I'll just come to Greg and talk about what are the kind of digital skills that that your university is offering to the faculty, students about this?
Well, thanks. Look, I'll speak broadly. So we're talking about two sort of very interlinked skill sets. On the one hand, we've got skills that we want to foster with our students, and particularly in the online space, but equally in the hybrid space more broadly. There are skills of self-regulation. There's skills about learning how to learn that we need to focus on for our students, and equally for our teachers, we need to give them the very clear tactics that allow them to scaffold and allow agency, and that includes the choice of learning and the choices for learning in their discipline, their specific disciplines. So luckily within the Scholarship of Higher Education, we've got a number of fantastic pieces of work that focus very directly on those skills, and there's a range of different taxonomies about what constitute digital mastery in teaching and learning, and they're very useful. But I have to confess, I'm equally interested in what's happening elsewhere. There are other sectors that seem to have done very well in terms of that work that helps to capture engagement for productive reasons. And among those sectors, for me, I'm very interested in the fan communities. So these are the communities that seem to hold captive a bunch of people spread across the globe who are all identify as Star Trek fans or Harry Potter fans, and they through their expression of their interest in that fan community, they interact across a range of different platforms and channels. You know, yes, they read the books and watch the movies, but they're very much more into the much more highly engaging sort of activities as well. So I think we need to, you know, really sort of take some of the research and scholarship very seriously, more seriously than we do, but also look elsewhere as well.
Right. Thank you so much. Nora, you raise your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to come in on the question around digital skills required. And I think, Greg, you've painted a really nice picture there of also what do we need to support students with? And I think that meta skill of learning to learn is so important. And how do you structure your own learning journey, and how do you kind of keep yourself going through that? But from an instructor perspective or from a faculty perspective, I would also sort of advocate that there's a couple of categories of skills that are really important when you're supporting faculty members or instructors for online or hybrid teaching. And I think the first thing, and we found this for us at Melbourne Business School, we found this especially when we first experimented with online, just that sort of skill of curiosity and having an experimental mindset of just, you're going to try some technologies, some of it will fail, you're probably going to be in front of students and you're going to feel stupid, and that's okay. And you can actually just talk to your students about what's happening. And of course, you need to be supported in that experiment with somebody by your side, but just, you know, supporting faculty to be willing to give that a go. So you might have done things in a specific way for years or for decades, but just give a different methodology a go and be a beginner again. So that's, I think, a really important skill. And then I think, Matt Hao-Chen, you mentioned something around, I think there was, to me, what you talked about earlier in how do you design for hybrid was a skill of inclusivity is how I would describe it. So how do you enable faculty members and instructors to design their learning in such a way that it's really inclusive of the different students' needs and their different preferences and how they're interacting with the course. And I think that's where you actually want to prioritize, especially if you're delivering in different modes at once. You really want to prioritize those who are actually on screen and give them ways to be engaged first before those who might be with you in the room. So that's the second thing, is skill of inclusivity. And then a third skill that has been really important for us, especially as we've gone about designing more exclusively on online courses, so no hybrid, is a skill of discernment. So what I mean by that is, if you're a faculty member or an instructor and again, you've known how to deliver your material really well for years, but you've been able to go with the flow of how a session evolves and how students are responding in face-to-face, and you've got all of this, a lot of content to draw on, you can't actually do the same in online. So you need to be really discerning about what actually needs to go into that learning experience, what's crucial, what will really help to make your learning outcomes come to life, and be discerning about which types of activities, be discerning about which types of interactivity, and which are the right technologies. But that discernment is really, we're finding that has actually been a challenge, because you often, members of my team who are learning technologists, they would be sitting with a faculty member and they would always try to put as much of their knowledge as possible into the experience, but the skill is actually, how do you make it smaller? How do you make it more digestible in order to keep engaging students? And I can see Matt Baker, it sounds like you're wanting to jump in there.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just actually had a follow-up question for Nora, and then we will go to Matt Chen and Matt Baker about this. So Nora, I think in general, when it comes to helping the faculty in terms of like the digital skills that they need to acquire, but I feel like, you know, there are certain faculty members who are more tech savvy than the rest, who quickly pick up all these skills quicker than those faculty members who are not that tech savvy. So what are the kind of training programs that are tailored specifically keeping all these unique challenges in mind for faculty members?
Yeah, again, I don't know that it's necessarily a tech issue first and foremost. I really do think it is a curiosity issue first and foremost, because a lot of the technology is not super complicated. It's just about actually playing with it. And then if you're not comfortable doing that just by yourself, having somebody to support you through it. So I don't think it needs to be formalized training. And I think different institutions are different. Melbourne Business School is fairly small, so we have only a base of about 40 or so faculty. So that means that the support that we offer does tend to be pretty personalized and one-to-one with faculty members. And like I said, it's just different ways of doing that will work for different institutions and their context.
Thank you so much for clarifying. And thank you so much for the type of skills that you have just mentioned right now. Okay, Martin, we'll come to you. Please go on.
Oh, sorry. It's me, right?
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah. Okay. So just so I think we talk about the digital skills. So at a faculty level, one thing is to provide professional development opportunity for the staff, especially like for the teaching staff, to get familiar with different new educational technology and feel comfortable to embrace the new technology rise. So as part of that, also kind of have professional development session around the lesson design for online setting. I think that's another thing we should consider, because the lesson design part, it will be quite different for a hybrid or online session. And just for the audience, I think it will be good to also clarify, I think all we talk about so far when we say hybrid, we're talking about having classes the same time for on-campus cohort and in-person, like online cohort. So the two different cohort at the same time. In terms of the flexibility, I think that word has been brought up quite a few times. So from our end, actually, apart from kind of the hybrid and online, we're actually exploring a new format, kind of a mixed mode. There's a combination of on-campus and online for some of our student cohort, because that kind of, that's what the student wanted from our sort of like feedback circle. We got from student, they want to have a mixed mode. So they want to have opportunity to connect with their peer kind of from the social side as well on campus, as well as having the flexibility to participate online. So this is one thing I want to mention. In terms of the skill set, I think student need, I really like the point that Greg mentioned about self-regulation. I think that's one of the key points about self-regulation and motivation to learn, because we heard a lot from students that they are less likely to engage in an online session because there's so many distractions out there. There's also a false sense of security that some students mentioned, that they feel like the recordings are available and they would watch it later. And they actually said, I didn't end up watching that much because they feel like there's a recording available. They can often refer back later, and that itself kind of not hinder, but kind of sometimes distract them from engaging in the live session. So I think that's also something I talked about earlier, to have the synchronized session very purposeful. You really want the student to be engaged there. So if it's 90% of the session being didactic, then that will be the consequence of student being disengaged. So having training session for students to help them with self-regulation, learning how to learn, I think those one would definitely help.
Right. Thank you so much, Matt. And Matt Baker, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a study that was done by Holon IQ around the barriers to improve digital and online learning. Took place about a year and a half ago, and the largest barrier that was identified, which we've already talked about here, was teacher capability and training, which has historically been one of the largest hurdles that we've seen in education around technology. But the second one I just wanted to highlight was the idea of culturally changing the way the institution kind of looks at these new technologies, as well as recognizing there's a change management process that needs to be put in place in order to get there. So it's not just saying, oh yeah, we need to train you, but then kind of leave it up to the masses to figure out where that goes. Institutions really need to understand that the faculty members want to be able to kind of have a bigger vision and understand what the institution is going to do to get them from A to Z, not just A to B, with and handing them into a new technology and say, it's all yours now. This is where we're going. So that was I think a really positive study that plays into what we've already identified here. The other thing I just want to mention around what Matt said, and that purposeful kind of activity, so keep them engaged. One thing we are testing real quick or looking at is how to bring AI into, because AI has to be in everything now, right? That's the phrase that needs to be included in every single sentence we talk about. But we're looking at how students can take advantage of being assisted in a synchronous setting with the support of an AI intervention. So be able to do quick summaries of what has already transpired in the session, or they don't understand a topic, and the AI can give them feedback on that topic, but within the context of what has already been said within the session itself, not some random, here's fluid dynamics, but fluid dynamics in the context of what has taken place in the last 30 minutes. So I think there's some really neat things too that we're looking at and that Eric identifies to keep people engaged, but have it be very purposeful. So students just don't shut off and say, oh, I'll go watch it after, but you need to see my face. So those are a couple of things that came up that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much, Matt Baker. Actually, I just want to ask another question to you that, I think there are a lot of discussions about the right skills that both the teachers and students need to be trained in. I think Nora has already mentioned about, how there's a discussion about the kind of right technology that one needs to, focus on. So in that aspect, what are, any tips or any guidance that the universities can maybe have in order to choose the relevant skills?
So I think two things. First is, you need to bring the technology that teachers and instructors are familiar with, so that there's a pathway for them to be comfortable going across the barrier of that new technology. If you create something completely new, they're going to be lost in space and really not see value. So we looked at the idea of taking the tools that they're traditionally used to and implementing those in more of a synchronous way, so they can be comfortable about implementing those in a synchronous fashion, because it is very hard to deliver synchronous courses with a ton of tools and those that you're not familiar with. So that's the first thing we've done, is try to figure out the best parity around that in-person classroom to what they can utilize online. The second thing I think is more of a directional piece, because what the information we've also recognized is when they move into the workforce, the rough numbers are 92% of L&D training that happens in the workforce now happens online. And so they've got to learn some type of muscle memory and skill set around being able to engage and see that online learning be productive for them in the workforce, that they've learned those skills in education. And, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to provide them with the skill set so they can be successful in the workforce. It's not about us, it's about them. And so one thing that we recognize is, and it could be different in different locations, Australia compared to what's happening in Singapore, what's happening in Brazil, et cetera. But their transition from the educational institution and the modality of learning is going to become fully online in their learning experience in the corporate setting. So how can we give them the skill set and understanding to be successful there? So those are the two things that come up for me.
Thank you so much, Matt Baker. And it's very interesting how you mentioned about, it's first important to introduce the technology that the faculties are already, familiar with. So that will already set the comfort level for them. And also it will be easier for the faculty to prepare students for the hybrid work that's already been the discussion, that the workplace is already going to be more of a combination of both online and in person. Right. So I think some of the conversation that we're already having, I think for a few months, is about how to understand the challenges that faculties are facing in terms of integrating the technology in the hybrid online courses, in terms of modernizing the pedagogy, in terms of the assessment models. So maybe I'll just go to maybe Matt Chin for a change, and then ask about the kind of conversations that you're having with your university staff and faculty about this.
I'm so sorry, Gitanja, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so I'm asking about the kind of conversations that you're having with your faculty members in order to understand their challenges, maybe like in terms of creating a more effective feedback loops to understand the faculty difficulties to integrate technology to modernize pedagogy, assessment models, and also engagement levels in general.
Yeah, sure. So I think some of the things here is around the different kind of feedback mechanism to solicit that from both student and staff. I think especially from the staff end to understand what teaching practice work or not in an online or hybrid setting. It's important to have data from learning analytics to see the engagement in asynchronous activity as well as the engagement in a live activity. So we get a better sense of that level of engagement and what were the challenges encountered there by the staff or by the student, and what technical issue they encounter. And whether there's opportunity to integrate some of the technology together so we have less platform. I think one of the challenges is about, there's so many different amazing creative tools out there these days, but often when the too many technology platform being available, it's also sometimes challenging to remember which one, or you forget how to use it. So having that as an opportunity to understand like the key features you need for engaging students in a scheduled teaching activity or developing their own asynchronous material, that's something we try to find out. Apart from that, is to also understand some of the feedback, like in general, like from industry partner to know actually what they're looking for, also skill and knowledge set they're looking for from the student, and then we kind of have that integrated in our curricula and in our teaching. So I think that's also another key part that we try to find out and support the student learning.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe I'll just go to Richanto Prabhuch about this and also ask him the kind of conversations about feedback loops to modernize pedagogy, the assessment models, and also to maybe assist maybe support faculty members in order to maybe choose the right technology and what challenges they're facing to modernize all this.
Yes, thank you. We do have the same strategy as Matt also just mentioned. We kind of limit the technology use in our university because we don't want to give a lot of variations to the students also. And we have a dedicated team here to help the faculty member to develop programs engagement in their course outline. So we have, I would say, end-to-end support to the faculty member from designing the course, developing the course. We also build a kind of pre-can activity for each blended strategy and on-site strategy. Let's say if they want to do a debate, can they still do the debate, student debate with the online facilities or not? Things like that. So we built the support not only about how the faculty member use the technology, but also the strategy of developing the course. How the most important thing is how to communicate in different modality. I think the interactions is the only conditions you will have the good engagement. So sometimes they just do not know how to communicate with the students in the online setting. They thought that they can do it as in the classroom setting. So we have to publish a kind of guideline for that. From the student is a little bit different. The way we support the students, when we have the technology update from our side, we can just easily publish infographic or a very short manual. They can just survive with that change. But for the faculty members, a little bit different. So we have to come up with more deliberate training sessions. We have to certify them. We have a basic certification for them where they have to use their LMS and how they use the synchronous video conferencing system in our university. For the students, let me go back to students. Then we implement a kind of study skill course or topics in the general education. So we have the Faculty of Liberal Arts department here. They are responsible to create a kind of basics study skill for our students, especially for our traditional students. For the professional students, that comes a little bit different characteristic we have. So they want to have more simpler course design. They have already experience in learning. They really know what to do. So we emphasize on the course design that pretty much create a kind of asynchronous session where they be more responsible to do a self-learning program. So I think that's from our side, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll just ask Greg this question about the similar conversations you're having to understand the faculties, maybe challenges to not only maybe pick the right data sets to modernize the assessment models, the pedagogy, and also to understand where else they can maybe focus on.
Oh, look, it's a great question, and we're deep into that particular topic at the moment. So I see a number of challenges when it comes to feedback loops. Fundamentally, we have an issue with data and feedback literacy. It's all very well and good to show teachers trends and patterns, but we need to do it in a way that's meaningful and that allows very easily for other tactics and other responses to be identified. And they're quite elusive, particularly when you realise that we're really at the start of our understanding about how engagement shows up digitally. So inclusive analytics is a really important, I think, direction, using what we can gather about data and trends and online behaviour, and use that as a way to find out why is it that in one subject it's the high SES students that seem to be failing less than the low SES, whereas in this subject, it all seems to be about neurodiversity, which is the highest difference. And another subject, it's about indigeneity and culture, perhaps. So I think there's a lot of further research that we can do about that link between achievement and particular learning design heuristics. And that's a longer term thing. The other challenge that I'd really point out, though, is kind of industrial. It's our academic workforce. And at the moment, I think that our academics, our teachers are very much overburdened with a number of institutional cues to deal with learning analytics, to deal with graduate attributes, to deal with so many different things. And I'm very concerned that the more that we dive into the resources and the supports that we're giving to faculty, we're essentially just signalling, please work for an extra 20 hours a week more. And so I think that we do need to be very careful and systematic about how we support faculty in identifying these things, knowing that it's a crowded space.
Thank you so much. I'll come to maybe Matt Baker and ask about what kind of conversations you're having with the university partners in terms of picking the right maybe data sets or technology in order to modernize assessment models.
Well, I would probably agree with Greg. It's a long process. Like, this is not an overnight thing, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot, I think, dissonance and just noise around what we're asking them to do holistically. So we're not taking this I don't know how to phrase it, but a big approach. It's more of a, let's start with the basics, the lowest common denominator to help these faculty members to be successful. And one way that came to me as we were talking about, you're talking about this, is most of the time faculty are spending their waking hours developing content for the LMS, right? That's just where they've been the last 2 decades. So we don't want to tell them, okay, stop that and go create something somewhere else. So one of the major things that we have done is create deep integrations from a asynchronous or LMS platform into the synchronous platform. So they're not having to figure out how to redesign the content that they've been curating for the last 2 decades. That's probably the most basic but most valuable thing I think that we're looking at doing or are doing is creating that connection between curated content that's already there to make that accessible in a synchronous fashion. So they're comfortable. They know what they're talking about. They know how to deliver it already. We're just giving them greater tools to make that engaging and interactive. But Greg, you mentioned you said a word around engagement. What was that word? It was awesome. I don't want to remember that. Inclusive engagement, was that what you said? What was was it inclusive analytics, perhaps? Yeah, inclusive analytics, right? I think that's really great because one thing we also recognized is when you bring people into a synchronous environment, there becomes this unconscious bias in how you start to deliver and who you deliver to and the people you call upon. And then that you lose those analytics across a large set because then you start focusing on a smaller one. So that's another way that we're trying to and working on building tools to have those analytics to be more diverse and inclusive, along with making it easier for teachers just to use the stuff they've already built over the last 2 decades. So that's how I would answer your question.
Thank you.
And I love inclusive analytics, Greg. I'm going to use that moving forward. I think that's really great because that unconscious bias is very, very prevalent in teaching online, especially when it's new for people.
Thank you so much, Matt Baker. I think we're nearing to the audience Q&A, but I don't see any questions in the box. So maybe I'll request the audience to quickly post some questions so that our panelists can share some more interesting insights. Maybe we'll just give a minute. So in the meantime, if any audience member posts questions, I just quickly ask about the ongoing discussions about accessibility, that apart from the flexibility, hybrid courses and online part of it gives the accessibility. But how can these courses widen this accessibility, enhance diversity in student cohorts, and to also tackle the problem of this digital divide for both faculty and students? Remember, just quickly go to Nora, please.
Thank you. Yeah, for us, this has been a really big issue, actually. As I said earlier, every institution is different. Every institution serves different students. For us, the average age of our student is about 36 years old. So we typically serve students who are already working, and most of our degrees are offered part-time. But in the past, the deal was that students would have to come to our campus after a day's work, between the hours of 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. And they would have to do that for several years to gain their MBA. So you can imagine the demands on individuals who were often in, full-time careers, often juggling caring responsibilities and everything else. So for that type of student, it was really important actually to be able to offer flexibility, because especially after COVID, what we were hearing from students is, well, if my employer is allowing for me to work from home, why aren't you guys, right? So we just had to actually create more of an offering that met the students where they're at. And so we have created an online brand, Melbourne Business School Online, and launched our suite of online courses to cater to that need for flexibility. And what we found in terms of the student profile is that it's really allowed us to bridge what is in Australia a regional divide. So in the Australian market, you typically see that people who come from regional areas have less access to education. And what we're finding now is 50% of our students are coming from regional areas. So that's actually a really important step for us in order to bridge a bit of a divide in terms of access to opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much, Nora. And before, I will definitely come to Rijanto, but I'll just quickly remind the audience to please ask some interesting questions for the panel to ask. So we have the last 10 minutes time, so please do post quickly questions. And okay, we'll go to Rijanto about this. Please go ahead.
I face this similar expectation from our adult students, and they expect more flexibility. So that's why we try to, it has been a year now that we ask our graduate programs to design the course as having about 30% asynchronous sessions. By then that they can have kind of flexibility in their day jobs. And as Nora also said, that even in Jakarta now, most of companies are allowing the employer to work at home, so they can study at the same times or they can study at night. However, the on-site session is also very interesting because Indonesia is very large. Most of the employers also taking the master degree outside from the Java island, they are interested to come to the capital city to have kind of refreshment week while they are doing the on-site session in our campus. So combination with blended learning between the asynchronous, synchronous, online, and also on-site, it's really a beauty of that. That's only not offering the flexibility, but also motivating the students to study now. So that's my additional thought from
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rijanto. Well, we have one question from our audience. It's a question from Abdul. His question is, how our socio-linguistic hates were changed during the COVID-19? Any panelists would like to answer this question? Okay, I'll see who's the one who's smiling the most. I'll go to Craig. Please answer.
It's a great question. I mean, the first thing I thought of when I read that was all of these new terms and nomenclature. So zumbling is a word that I learned quite a while back, and that's that process of making a mistake during a Zoom session, zumbling, like bumbling. So I do think, like from a sociolinguistic point of view, there's this new collection of vocabularies, right, that now teachers use, and it's happening. It's a very interesting sort of repertoire that people are bringing to the teaching and learning experience. But I'll have to think about that question probably a little bit more deeply than than just that. So I'm happy for somebody else to take the reins on that one.
Any panelists would like to go ahead? Okay, no problem. We'll just go to the next question. It's by a question by an anonymous attendee. And I like the part when the speaker mentioned about content curation and synchronous integration. Yes, agreed that they have been developing their content for years and decades, and they have a lot of resources in their arsenal. What will be the challenges in implementing this, as most of the platforms require users to recreate the contents in the platform? Any panelists would like to go ahead?
I would just approach it from a technology standpoint. You don't want technology for technology's sake, right? So to what Eric or Matt mentioned quite a few times is it has to be purposeful. And so just because you have the content, it doesn't mean you have to use it all in a synchronous session. Remember, you're going from a synchronous standpoint or asynchronous to a synchronous, and those modalities are a little different. So there, I think, needs to be instruction around what does work well, what can and cannot use in a fashion that would be positive. So I just would be careful when you bring it across that you don't just bring everything because it's there. So that's kind of my thought.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. So you have one more question. It's by Ashoka. Can you share experiences of handling engagement? Sometimes they're online, but they are doing other work too. Any panelists would like to go ahead?
I'm happy to jump in there. I mean, there's various ways of handling that, but just one technique is around agreements that you set in place or put in place with your students up front. So for example, as between a faculty member and your group of students, can you agree that it's cameras on and you'll only switch it off for the rare exception? And then also, I think there's kind of, it's on us now as educators to design in such a way that it is actually engaging. So you can't just talk for an hour in an online session and expect that students will stay there and not do something else. So you have to give them something to do. You have to, just for a few, do something for a few minutes at a time only. Just work with the fact that attention spans have become shorter, and don't try to fight it, but really try to redesign your learning around it.
I might just add to that quickly, if I may. Absolutely, Nora, I completely agree. And I think we can't forget that people have spent more than 12 years in a very normalized situation where they know what to do when they enter a classroom. There's chairs, there's seats, there's usually a whiteboard at the front. People know what to do when they enter that space, and they have far less familiarity when coming into these learning experience and learning management system platforms. They just don't know what to do and where to go. And it behooves us to give that very direct instruction to say, these are our expectations. And there is a role that the user interface and the technology plays, but there's a very strong role for the teacher to be very explicit about what are the expectations and the rules of engagement. So yeah, just adding my voice to that, Nora, if you don't mind. I completely agree.
Thank you so much, Greg. And now,
I just want to add one thing, because Nora brought up a very, very pointed idea that cameras on is very important. Because that engagement becomes really face-to-face, and teachers recognize that if they don't understand the body language and they can't see what's going on, they become completely disconnected. One thing that technology can do, or that we've recognized, is we've created a privacy mode where students can turn their camera off for other students, but keep it on for the instructor. And that completely changes the idea of how they feel comfortable and engaging. So I think technology, along with policy, along with the support of faculty and understanding and getting people to move into a new modality and normality that they're not used to, as Greg mentioned, all those need to play together, or else if you don't you only capture one and everything else fails, you're still going to lose out. So I'll just add to what Nora and Greg said.
Thank you so much, Matt Baker. And we have exact 2 minutes. I'll just quickly ask a futuristic question to everyone in terms of what kind of policies or regulations are all the universities thinking about in terms of strengthening industry links so that you can create more employable graduates to be adjusting to the hybrid work that now everyone is anticipating, in terms of how these new tools and technologies can enhance hybrid or online courses in general. So maybe I'll just go to quickly Matt Chen about it. Please go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks, Gitanja. So I think for this one, I think first and foremost, we probably need to understand kind of the industry need for specific discipline, right? For their discipline, and then start having, if the university not already have it, industry advisor board, to get the feedback from industry to understand, what skill knowledge set they need for that. It will help them to better understand, the job market and what skill sets that are required for that discipline. And secondly, I think we should consider collaborate more to bring in the industry partner to have that industry-based learning opportunity, so that student can engage that, whether it's online setting or hybrid setting, so that they understand what the workplace looks like when they go to industry. And you provide a channel for kind of also provide channel for industry partner to understand the course, like whether the content, the teaching are relevant to the graduate they're looking for, and they can provide that feedback to the university. The other idea I was thinking is the kind of a co-design process, because often we are trying to fix things. We're trying to fix things like finding a missing part from our curricula or assessment, and to have it fixed. Why not we just involve all the different stakeholders, industry partner, alumni, current student together in the co-design process for this online or hybrid experience, to understand, what are the pain point challenges that they need, so that we kind of prepare that in advance rather than fixing as it goes. So that's kind of just what I want to mention here.
Okay, thank you so much, Manchin. Unfortunately, I think we have run out of time. So I'll just quickly share my screen. Yes, so, okay, so thank you so much. Thank you all the audience for being part of our webinar today. And definitely, I would like to take this opportunity to definitely thank each of our panelists. That's Matt Chen, Greg Winslet, Nora, and we have Rijanto, which also share very interesting insights and also contribute more to this ongoing discussion, which will always happen, I'm sure, when it comes to hybrid being the preferred form of teaching and learning. And definitely I'd like to thank Matthew Baker for sharing interesting insights into how CLAS is supporting universities to enhance hybrid and online teaching and learning. Also, everyone who's registered for this event will receive the full and on-demand version of this webinar, which will be hosted on the THE website along with a summary article of its key findings for those of you who would like to revisit or share this content. So goodbye, take care, and we'll see you next time in future TH events. Thank you so much.